Hello, welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. We're also live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, joined by our chief sports writer, Ryder. Later on the show, we will get to some specific Newcastle United questions, so do load them up into the comments there. But just before we do, I just want to get Lee's view on a survey that has been run across all our regional titles, all our national titles here at Reach PLC, about the future of the beautiful game. It's called Our Clubs, Our Future. And we want fans to have their say. I'll pop the link to the survey into the comments in a moment. And we're asking all our chief sports writers from all our clubs to have their say. This has come out of the fallout of the European Super League proposals. And what I'm going to do is run through, I think it's 8 questions or so, and just get Lee's take on how he would answer this survey. So, Lee, to start with, do you think clubs involved in the European Super League proposals should be punished? The options given here: yes, there should be docked points; yes, with financial sanctions; yes, with suspension from the Premier League; yes, with relegation from the Premier League; or no.
I mean, for me, they would have to be docked points. I think relegation would probably be too severe. I think the financial penalties, they don't hurt these rich football clubs. There's no fine big enough they could give them. So for me, it would be points deductions because, they went behind everyone's back. They've been in it for themselves. It's greed. And yeah, for me, I was thinking about this the other day, and, would probably have to be about 20-30 point deduction to really get the message across, because to do that would put obviously some of them, the so-called big clubs, in relegation trouble, and others it would mean they wouldn't be able to win the title or qualify for Europe. So yeah, points deduction. That's a long answer for a short question.
And second question is, how do you feel about the suspension of the European Super League? I know me personally, I was over the moon. I was so angry when it proposed. I made no bones about that. How did you feel when you saw the news breaking that it had been cancelled?
Yeah, it was quite remarkable, really, the way it all unfolded. Being realistic, I think we've had a talk of a European Super League for decades now. Absolute decades. It's very much a fantasy thing, really, and I know UEFA have got their own idea of how they're going to do it, which hasn't gone down well with the clubs. So to see it sort of break up was refreshing in some way, just because of the way they'd gone about it. But overall, I do think we will have a European Super League at some point, but it has to be done right, and it's got to be done where it is competitive rather than just a free ticket into the league, and then you don't get relegated and things like that, because then the rich clubs get richer and the poor clubs get poorer.
I mean, that removing the element of competition really did wind me up. The next question is, who do you think was most at fault for the European Super League? We've got the options of Perez and Agnelli, so that's from Madrid and Juventus. The owners of the Premier League clubs, UEFA, or all of the above, or the option of suggesting somebody else?
I would probably say it's a combination of all of them. UEFA have ended up in this mess because they haven't come up with a suitable format for a European Super League. If it's done properly, it could be a good thing. The Champions League. I'm old enough to know what happened with the Champions League. It used to be straight knockout competition, only the champions qualified. Newcastle United benefited from the expansion of it. We've had some of our best nights as supporters in the Champions League as Newcastle fans. So to have some type of European Super League and get the opportunity to go in it would be, it would still be a good thing, but it's got to be done properly. It's got to be done fairly, and you can't just leave the smaller clubs to perish. And you still have to. We've got a very proud football league system, and that should be maintained. There's no two ways about it.
From 1 to 10, with 0 being not at all and 10 being extremely, how optimistic do you feel about the future of football now the European Super League is no more?
I mean, as optimistic as I was probably before all this broke, really. Probably about 6 or 7 out of 10. We do leave ourselves open in football for greed, and no doubt something else will, come up again and put things in jeopardy. But it's been interesting to see the reaction from it. I mean, for all, you had Gary Neville getting national plaudits for what he was saying. The players, they wouldn't have much of a choice anyway. Gary Neville was one of the first ones on the plane when Manchester United went to the World Club Championships back in the day and didn't bother taking part in the FA Cup. So it's all right giving it the big one now, how much you're against it, but the players and the big earners, they'll just want to continue bolstering the bank balance, because that's what they're in it for. A lot of them are. So it was fascinating to see the reaction of football, the reaction of fans. I think it's because of the way life has been with COVID. You got something outside Arsenal's ground. Their supporters, people used to talk about it being the library, didn't it, at Emirates and Highbury? But they certainly made their voices heard when they needed to. So fair play. But yeah, it's one of them where it's been a real talking point, and every club has had something to say about it.
Scenes down at Arsenal were quite something last week. What is the main issue, Lee, for you that is threatening the sustainability of football? I'll just run through the options because they are quite a few. Ticket prices, kick-off times, lack of ownership accountability, poor leadership and governance, no football on terrestrial TV, how the money is distributed in the game, the size of transfer fees, wages and agent fees, the lack of competitiveness, the gap between the wealthiest clubs and the rest, losing the next generation of supporters due to the prices, a new UEFA club competition, and the financial impact of COVID. A lot of options there. For me, I would say I think the lack of ownership accountability is a big one. We know from what we report on Newcastle, trying to get anything out of the club and especially Mike Ashley, it's a very difficult thing to do. So for me, it would be lack of ownership accountability. But what would be the biggest threat for you?
I mean, for all clubs, I would say exactly what you just said, because we don't hear enough from the owners, and when we do, it's on their terms, and it's not a fair race, if you like. It goes to maybe one national newspaper or one broadcaster, and the days. I mean, we go back to when Freddie Shepherd was at Newcastle, and he had his critics. There's no doubt about that. But what he would do is he would sit down with the press, at least once a season with the national press, and give them a chance to have a conversation with them. With the local press, he was fantastic in terms of he would take a call. He would ring you up, and even before my time covering Newcastle, I know Freddie Shepherd used to pick up the phone, and if he wanted to get something across, he would do it, whether it was controversial or not. So that's what you want to see. I think it's almost like football's turned into a bit of a corporate affair now, where it's about the pounds that you pay. If you pay the money, if you are a rights holder, you will have more of an opportunity to get to speak to people, and I don't think that's right. You go back to different eras. Again, before my time, I know there was reporters that used to deal with people like Brian Clough, Jack Charlton, and they'd want the local reporter in the office because they'd want to get their message across to the fans. It's not about the reporters. We just carry the information. But really, if you want to get your message across and you want people to be interested in buying tickets and being part of the club, then you have to use every platform available to you.
Indeed. The next question is, do you support the concept of fan ownership models? Obviously, we've got the 1892 pledge. We've got a lot of people talking about this 50+1 system they use in Germany. I mean, that until 1998, private ownership in Germany of any kind was prohibited. So that, in a way, suggests just how difficult it would be to see a similar model implemented in the Premier League, because, when that system was implemented, you didn't have any billionaire owners or millionaire owners because it was prohibited. So it's an interesting concept, isn't it? This one of fan ownership.
Yeah, it is, and I think Dortmund supposedly have this in place. I've been over to Dortmund. It's a brilliant setup at the club, and everything about it, makes you fall in love with football more than you did probably the first time because it's set up so well. But realistically, how much power the fans got, because I know Dortmund, for one, have had to sell their best players over the years, and I couldn't see supporters agreeing to that and voting to sell your supporters, because say that was the case in Newcastle now, and every fan had a vote whether Alan St. Maximin is sold for whatever the price tag is, not many would vote for it. I would say they would like to keep the best players. So I think there's a lot of twists and turns in all of that. But I think the fans, they should be on board. And I think over the years in Newcastle, they have had the fan forum, but it was only sort of limited numbers. I don't know how you manage it so that everybody gets a say in things. Kevin Keegan famously said once, he's the manager, but there's 35,000 managers in the stand making decisions for him. So yeah, it's very difficult.
On to the next question, and it is: which of these governing bodies do you want to see act more in order to make football better? You have the FA, the Premier League, UEFA, FIFA, UK governments, and it's an interesting one because I would say I think all of them in their own way have to try and work together, not just here in the UK. You want to see all leagues across Europe as well come together, and if there's an issue, which clearly the big clubs think there is, sit down around the table and try and sort it out for the benefit of not just them but everybody.
Yeah, you would say all of them need to improve. You speak to any journalist, yourself what it's like trying to get the Premier League to comment on the record about something. It's very difficult. I have to say it's an opportunity to say a well done to the AFL, because every time I've dealt with the AFL, I've actually got through to somebody. I've had a conversation with them, and I've been given, either a comment or some steer on what's going on. Now that's the division below, obviously, and it would have been interesting, as painful as it would have been interesting to see how the takeover process may have worked had Newcastle got relegated. We didn't want Newcastle to get relegated, by the way, but it's interesting to see how different bodies. Yeah, the FA have had dealings with them before. UEFA can be difficult. They've made it. They pulled the restrictions back on the accreditation for the European Championships this year, so they haven't made it easy for people to cover the tournament. So yeah, it's. I think they all could improve.
Yeah, definitely improvements all around. Just finally, then, on this survey, Lee, what would your overriding message to be to make football better for everybody?
Overall, would be, the fans to feel like they're part of their club again. And I don't know I don't know what the magic formula is for that, but I go back to a different era altogether, and I know you simply couldn't have it now. But when Newcastle United were made in Castle and you had all the supporters, they were watching training and they were getting to meet the heroes after every session. I guess that for health and safety, that you just couldn't have that now, and certainly with the COVID problems we've had. So to maybe not get that to happen again, because I don't think it could, but to try and get that same spirit around the club again, where people do feel like they're involved. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens after the pandemic or after COVID, once we get a little bit back to life as we know it, what opportunities there will be for supporters at Newcastle.
Indeed. I think just putting fans first, isn't that the message across? And it's interesting you mentioned what's going to happen when we get back. That was the end of the questions for the survey. I've put the survey into the comments there, so please do fill that in and share your thoughts. It's interestingly because when we get back to normal and fans can get back in, there is that massive issue of those 10,000 free season tickets and what happens there, because I know obviously for obvious reasons that's not been at the forefront as of anything over the past year, because we've had bigger things to deal with. But when plans are put in place to allow fans back in and a full house, however many months away that might be, that's something they're going to have to address, isn't it?
Yeah, it's whether the sort of pandemic has almost whetted people's appetite to get back to football, and supporters may really want to get back into it. Obviously, the pandemic's been going on a year now. There's youngsters, they're getting older, they'll be wanting to get up to the ground. They may be saying to the parents they want to get up there. So everything changes. There's always a different cycle on things, but ultimately it's about the product on the pitch. And Newcastle this season have been fortunate in some games that there wasn't a crowd in, because I think they would have been booed off. But by the same token, in equal measure, I think they would have been applauded off in some games. And there's been a different reaction to certain matches because there's been no crowd in. The West Ham game is the ultimate example. Obviously, they had a great first half, went 2-0 up, got pegged back at 2-2, but won the game very late on. Now, if there was a crowd in for that, everyone would have been going absolutely crazy. People have been filing into town, going to the pubs and all that sort of thing. But instead, because people were stuck in their homes and on Twitter scrolling away, then they found the negative in it rather than the positive, because you can't replace that buzz of a last minute or late winner. I mean, the scenes at Anfield at the weekend I was fortunate to be there, and believe me, the emotions with it for all to see, even in the press box, because we don't get anything at Liverpool normally, apart from a defeat, and to score so late in the game after having that one disallowed. Yeah, the emotions, do get the better of you sometimes. And for me, that was good, because it just reminded me what football was about. And it's about fan feeling, and it's about, getting excited and celebrating. Believe me, if that had happened with a crowd in at Anfield, then I don't think they would have left the ground for about an hour and a half after the game. You know what I mean? It was unique that it happened that way. So, it's not all negative about Newcastle United. We have got a decent set of players. When you look around the team, people like Almiron, Saint-Maximin, Callum Wilson, they're all decent players, and there's something there to build a team around. So, I think that's what Kevin Keegan said about not giving up on the team and just getting behind the players, and that's ultimately what it's about. It shouldn't be about politics and the toxic place which Twitter is turned into, and people scrolling looking for negativity. It's it's an awful place on there, and you can't let your head get stuck into it for too long, because you can't take it seriously, unfortunately. And the real world is out there, and Newcastle United will eventually play in front of a crowd again, and I think the majority of people that go will enjoy the experience.
We've got a question here from Robin Woods, and he asks, the Liverpool game, Lee, did we really play that well? There were loads of errors at the back that should have been punished. We could have easily lost 4-1. I don't agree with him, wholly on that point. And someone actually else in the comments has said, well, yeah, but we could have won 4-1, and that's the beauty of football. So what do you say there to Robin? I guess, Lee, it's about, regardless of how many chances Liverpool had, it's about still being in the game, which Newcastle were, still having that spirit to get that goal, and just having that desire to push forward and give everything to try and get at least a point.
Yeah, I think for me it wasn't a classic performance by any stretch of the imagination, because had Liverpool had the shooting boots on, then yeah, it would have been over long before it was. And there were a few errors at the back, but but also a lot of good bits of defensive work. Even, the marking of Salah. I mean, he got a great goal early on, but after that, he couldn't fault the defence. They made life difficult for him. Dubravka had a great game, but it's staying in games, and at places like Anfield, that's what you've got to do to stay in the game. And thankfully, they did it. But the big positive was the team spirit. That after having that one chalked off, they could have easily lost their heads, but they readjusted and got on with the game and found an equaliser that did count. It was just great stuff from a football supporting point of view. So they deserved a point. I don't think anyone could deny them that. I think it would have been too much to ask for a win at Anfield, given how many chances Liverpool had. But it's a good point. It's got to be backed up now against Arsenal.
100%. And what did you make of the scenes on the touchline as well? I think we briefly covered it in the immediate post-match podcast on Sunday, was it, or Saturday? Saturday. So what did you make of it in a bit more detail of, when the goal went in, they all rushed over to Steve Bruce, bit of a hug. It was nice to see, I think, many people think.
Yeah, and you've got to give everybody the credit when they get a good result. When they go 4 games unbeaten, you've got to give them the credit, surely. If they get the criticism when they get beat, you have to give a bit of credit when they get a positive result. I know people won't agree with me. I don't really care. The reality is that you have to be fair in football, and you have to look beyond whether you like somebody or not. And a lot of people just don't like Steve Bruce. So that's, I'm pretty neutral on it all. He's certainly not my favourite manager. We've had people like, Kevin Keegan and Bobby Robson in charge, but when he took the job, he knew he had a tough task on his hands, and it's proved to be all that and more. And the fact that, on 36 points with 5 games to go, says they're up against it to get more points than last season. So it's one of them where credit where it's due when they get a good result, and you've got every right as a supporter to criticise when they get beat. But the one thing you've got to do is just look after your own mentality. When they win, enjoy watching your team win, and don't look for the negatives. Enjoy the positives of it. That's always been my view on it. Whether it's a scrappy late 1-0 win or you win 5-0, enjoy seeing your team win, because with Newcastle, certainly in the last 10 years, it's been they've lost more than they've won. So let's hope we can have a relatively enjoyable end to the season.
Fingers crossed. Lots to talk about Jacob Murphy. I think you were the one that revealed actually his contract has another year to run. There was lots of talk it would end this summer. How do you rate his chances of getting a new contract? Do you think it's pretty much inevitable if they all come to an agreement on the wage and the length, etc.?
Well, the saying that talks have started, but I think the talks have always been going on in the background. So I don't know where that story come from. But yeah, he has got another year left. It's not unusual for someone to be in talks with the board about a contract with a year to go. There's a couple of others that need sorting. But for me, I said it ages ago. He deserves a contract, especially with the way the window's going to be in the summer. So let's hope he gets that one signed and it's done.
Joe Willock, Steve Bruce has made it clear he would like to keep Joe Willock at Newcastle. Is there any hint from Steve Bruce or from people you've maybe spoken to whether if Arsenal let him go, Steve Bruce would take him back on loan, would like it to be a permanent deal? £20 million has been talked about. Or is it a case they'll just take it anyway and they'll just want Joe Willock back, regardless of whether it's on loan or a permanent deal?
I just think it's one where season-long loan deal again next season seems like the most obvious choice. But realistically, are Newcastle going to splash out 20 million for a player in the next window when we've already been told there's no money to spend? I think they will look for the loan deal first and foremost. But for Joe Willock, it's a great chance. Would you rather be, playing every game in 4 at Arsenal or playing every week at Newcastle? And if it's every week at Newcastle, I'm sure he'll take it.
If that comes off, and a lot of fans wanted to, Steve Bruce is clearly keen. What does that mean for the likes of Matty Longstaff? Now, we know Sean Longstaff is in the team and he's performing quite well. He's getting back to that level we know he can be at. But what does that mean for the likes of Matty Longstaff, who was promised a route to first team football and he's not been given it? The likes of, even Elly Anderson, who, is on the verges of breaking into that first team and really does need to start playing first team football at a high level to develop.
Yeah, it's strange what's happened to Matty Longstaff, especially given that he signed a contract believing he would be getting game time. Unfortunately, that hasn't really happened this season, so you can't really say he's developed as much as you would like to see him. I'm sure, as well as Joe Willock's done, it'll be frustrating for him to see somebody on the big stage when that could be him, and it's a player Newcastle invests a lot of time in. But they need to come up with a plan. What's going to be best for Matty Longstaff next season? There's still 5 games left this year, so maybe he gets a chance in them to show what he keeps getting thrown in the deep end, doesn't he? Keeps getting chucked in, against the big teams. Man City, for example, this season, Man United last season, and done very well. And every time he's come in the team, he's done well. So, there's a couple of big fixtures coming up before the end of the season. So maybe he can get another opportunity, and he certainly won't. He's certainly not the type of character to shirk that opportunity.
And Elly Anderson, do you see him maybe knocking on the door in the summer and saying, "Let me go out for 6 months on loan to get a bit of first team action"?
Yeah, I think that probably should have happened in January, really, with the benefit of hindsight. He didn't get an opportunity. He got his debut, which is a dream come true for the lad. But I think he's hungry to play more games. I went to the game last night at St James Park, and despite the heavy scoreline, Elly Anderson still put in a very mature performance for someone with a young head on his shoulders. So he's one for the future. I think a loan deal would be ideal for him next season. Look at somebody like Adam Armstrong, who's ended up being sold by the club, but he's gone somewhere and he's been given a first team opportunity at Blackburn Rovers, and he's been absolutely brilliant. He's got close to 50 goals for the club, and he's won that. You would now not rule out him returning to Newcastle at the end of his current contract at Blackburn, which expires in about 12 months' time. So he could come back. But at the end of the day, they need to go out and get experience. Paul Dummett's another good example of that. There was a lot of players. He tells the story better than me, but there was an opportunity to go to Gateshead, and I think a few of the players were taking the mickey out of him a little bit for putting his hand up and saying, "Yeah, I'll have a go at that." But it got him experience, got him at St Mirren, and then got him in the first team at Newcastle. So go out and take those loan opportunities, and I'm sure Elly Anderson will grasp any chance that comes his way.
I mean, Lee, you watch a lot of the 23s and 18s, many more games than most other reporters and journalists. Paul's asking, is there something that we need to address? He thinks that the youngsters seemingly are going backwards with the league performance and position in this season. What would you say to that? And can you give any insight into the quality within the 23s and under 18s?
I don't think they're going backwards. I think it's been a tough season for the academy if you look at the league tables, but they have had the issue of the COVID, and the squads have been in different bubbles this season, so it hasn't been easy for them to just nip up and down to the senior training camp and join in or get a bit of advice. So it's been a difficult season for them, but getting to the quarterfinals of the FA Youth Cup was a big plus. The under-18s beat Manchester United 3-2 the other day, so shows there's players coming through who are capable. I mean, Elly Anderson is a standout player. Joe White's doing very well, and he, could get a bit of a chance in pre-season. We don't know yet. Lucas De Ball, who played last night, has had a very good season. Dylan Stevenson, Kyle Crossley scored his first under-23 goal the other day. You've got the goalkeeper Dan Langley. There's probably a few others that I've missed out because I've been sort of put on the spot. But there's there is if you are interested in under-23 and under-18s football, there is a lot of players that have got a chance at Newcastle. So if you ask the staff, they'll say results aren't that important and league positions aren't. Well, they are important, but they're not at the top of the list. It's about development and making sure the players are ready when they get in the first team. And people like Sean Longstaff, Matty Longstaff, Elly Anderson have all proved that they are at a level where they can do well given the chance.
One man who played with the under-23s earlier this week was Fabian Schar. So he made a return. Good to see him working back to fitness. Do you think he might be okay for maybe the last couple of games of the season?
Oh, almost certainly that he'll play in a couple of games because he needs to boost his own fitness for Switzerland at the Euros, which is obviously coming up. And yeah, he's one where we've still got results without him, so he's going to have to fight for his place. But when he's on song, he's certainly one of the best defenders at the club. So hopefully they can get something positive from him.
Definitely. Well, just to wrap up then, Lee, let's just briefly talk about the Premier League Hall of Fame. Alan Shearer inducted into it, 260 goals. I mean, for me, and I'm sure for you, never in doubt. Yet there is always a bit of debate about whether Shearer should be inducted. A certain former Manchester United defender, we shall name him, Rio Ferdinand, said Shearer didn't win enough and therefore he was not in his top 10. Not even the first two, but the top 10 of his picks, which quite rightly has enraged a few Newcastle United fans. I mean, Lee, no doubt, is there, that Shearer, the finest goal scorer in the Premier League, deserves to be the first name into the Hall of Fame?
100%. I mean, I can only go off my own feelings. I was lucky enough as a supporter to see Alan Shearer arrive at the club. I was in the car park that day at the Leeds End when he was unveiled, and it was a massive day in the history of Newcastle as a city, because it changed so much in terms of you had the best. Well, he wasn't the best striker in England at the time. He was probably in the top 3 strikers in the world. So it was a world-class signing, and it's one where it's not just about goals with Alan Shearer. He was a complete team player, set a certain standard, wouldn't let people slip beneath those standards, and if they did, then they would soon know about it. I've said some of these things before, but he was always one of the first people back to defend a corner. How many headed clearances did he make from corners? How many games did he win for Newcastle? Some of them when he was on his last legs, but when he used to run the ball into the corner and waste time and help get a win for the team, his gamesmanship, that sort of the instant with Roy Keane summed that up in the Gallagher corner. So loads of memories, but he's just somebody you could hang your hat on. I think the best example of it for me is probably the game against Leicester when Newcastle were 3-1 down St James's Park, and they needed somebody to just step up and change the game, and he got a hat-trick that day. So it was games like that will live long in the memory.
I just love it when you hear him speak. If people have not seen it on Sky, they did the launch of the Hall of Fame, and Shearer was talking about joining Newcastle, following his dream and always wanting to go back to Newcastle. And he said it many times, and he's got no regrets. He could have gone to Man United and won more trophies. And every time you hear him say it, as a Newcastle United fan, you can't help but be swept along in that kind of emotion, because it means everything to him to have been able to pull on that black and white shirt, He was inducted, Lee, with Thierry Henry, and obviously the list is up for the next 6 nominees to be put forward. Les Ferdinand, Andy Cole in there. Is there anyone, I mean, them 2 names, some of, again, one of Newcastle's greatest goal scorers in both, Les Ferdinand and Andy Cole. Would you put the case forward for either them 2 to be included?
Oh, absolutely. I would say both of those players. For me, somebody like Rob Lee should be in it because he was Newcastle's probably best midfielder in the entertainers era. Got a lot of goals. You look at where he was when he come at the club. He come from Charlton, and he had 10 years here. And when Newcastle were at the very best, Rob Lee was right in there, and he got into the England team as well. So for me, I'm sure some fans around the country would probably make their own case, but for me, Rob Lee would be certainly in there. But yeah, maybe I'm being a little bit biased.
No, not at all. I think that's the beauty of it, though, as well. If you go around and ask any football fan of any club, they'll always pick someone of their own. I think Gary Speed as well, who's not actually in that list, deserves a mention. I mean, over 500 appearances in the Premier League, and he was again one of those midfielders who maybe didn't grab the headlines, but goodness me, wasn't he key to that Newcastle United side under Sir Bobby?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that was another great era under Bobby when, I think everything come together really, and you had players like Craig Bellamy around who injected some pace into the team as well. And, Gary Speed was a big part of that. And he was another who set a certain standard in the dressing room, the way he conducted himself. I think I'll borrow this story from journalists who were before me, but there's an incident where when Craig Bellamy first signed, I think he just snubbed all the journalists and jumped on the bus. And I think Gary Speed was one of the first ones who went on the bus and went, "That's not how it works in Newcastle. Go back out and talk to them." And, just little things like that. And that helped make it such a great team that not only got in the Champions League, I think they finished in the top 3 and then the top 4, but really they could have won the title in either of them seasons. People forget that. Newcastle have been a club at certain points in time where they've been challenging to win not just the cups, the actual full Premier League. So yeah, good days.
I agree with you. I still maintain, had Newcastle beaten Everton that day, had Scarrison not taken out Olivier Bernard and left him on the turf, and Newcastle had won that game, they would have won the title. But, we can't look back and think, what if? Just finally then, Lee, Arsenal up next for Newcastle. Do you think this is a good time to play Arsenal, and can Newcastle continue this good run of form they're on?
Yeah, I mean, I've done an article this morning on this. I think I had a discussion about it where if they can't beat an Arsenal team who are, in the middle of 2 Europa League ties, who have got injuries and aren't going to be able to play the strongest team in all 3 of those games, then, it's a real opportunity. The way Newcastle are playing to keep things going. If they do want to get more points than they did last season, then they're going to need to win this game and 2 others. So this is the best chance to get a win against one of the so-called bigger teams.
Definitely. Well, fingers crossed Newcastle United do, and they make it a lovely bank holiday weekend. Lee, thank you as always for joining us on the Everything is Black and White podcast. To you guys watching and listening, please do fill in that survey that I popped in the comments, and please remember to like and subscribe to whichever platform you are joining us on.